relationships don't just happen to you passively, where it just sort of happens and you wander through it. I mean, it can be that way.
A number of setups that people get into, which create these challenges, create suffering, create a lot of pain.
Dude, in a way, like, I just can't stand myself anymore. Like, I can't keep doing things the same way, because it's clear to me now that it's not her, it's me. Okay, I'm here with my old friend, Nick Solaczek. Thanks for sitting down with me, my man.
Absolutely. Great to be here.
We are in a recording studio. You've got electric guitars behind you. I've got a soundboard behind me. And the reason we're here is because we're talking about relationships. And we wanted a great forum to sit down in person together and hash out and share a number of things that have been working really well for us in what we've got going on right now, which is the Conscious Relationship Council. This is a circle of men where we are sharing and learning about romantic relationships. So we're going to talk about how men can crack the code and figure out how to make long-term relationship happen. We're going to figure it out right here today.
All right. Well, that's a big setup for the big expectation for this conversation today. I hope we can do that and create some insight and provide some value. We are just wrapping up the Conscious Relationship Council, as you said, which is our 12-week live training, and it's gone really well. And I think part of that is just the way that the men have stepped up and the way they've been empowered with certain insights and understandings and practical tools they can use. They've just gotten so much value from that and made such a difference in their lives that it's sort of re-inspiring back to me, for example, as a facilitator. And it's really great to see people having breakthroughs and getting the results that they want. I know for me, I never had a conscious relationship teacher until I sought one out. And there was no course, there was no curriculum in school. My parents certainly didn't know anything about that. They came from, poor immigrant families, and they were doing their best to survive and keep the family afloat and keep presents under the tree at Christmas and, all the kind of things that parents do to try to create a great life for their children. And so all that's wonderful, and I appreciate that. But I think other people, maybe in my demographic or my age range, had a similar experience, and the culture has there's many things going on in our time that has created this opportunity for more learning and growth and for purpose and aliveness. And I certainly feel that I want more of those things. I want a great relationship, and I also want a relationship that I use for learning and growth that becomes an enlightening experience for me. The challenge is I thought that would be positive and really no roadblocks, no challenges, no pain, no grief, no sadness. And I'd be taking the smart path, unlike maybe others who didn't learn certain tools and just live a life of suffering. And what I've discovered and what many people discovered is relationships are hard work, no matter what way you approach it, and that the path of conscious relationship does get easier. But there really is a lot of digging and processing and integrating and figuring out how to get your needs met in a relationship and how to cohabitate with a partner, for example, during a unique challenge like a pandemic. So there's no shortage of things to discuss.
So what you're saying is that men need to actively work on their relationships, right? That from a starting point, I think this is worth just starting here, is like, relationships don't just happen to you and then you just kind of go through them passively. I mean, that can be how it goes.
That's okay, yeah.
Relationships don't just happen to you passively, where it just sort of happens and you wander through it. I mean, it can be that way, but you actually have to actively work on it and work on yourself in the relationship to overcome the barriers that are there for you. And each person has their own barriers. So yeah, I think I come from a place, and my dad definitely comes from a place where you just focus on the externals of the relationship You get together, you get married, you have a house, you have kids, and you provide for your family, and that's all that there is. And I think what you were speaking to earlier is that our generation wants more than that. We want a depth in relationship. There's a lot of men who they want the full package, which includes a partner that they're attracted to, they have great sex with, they have a lot in common, and they have what feels almost like a spiritual connection and an emotional connection with their partner. And that part wasn't taught to our generation. That part, our generation is almost having to learn ourselves. We're having to figure that out ourselves. And there were people in the generation above us that did learn and practice that stuff, and they did write books about it, but it's like niche. And so what we've done in this course is we've gone and dug around and we've done our own learning, and then we're sharing that with men in a circle that is really conducive to learning. I was saying to you earlier that you can go and learn all this stuff in books, but for me, like the retention, it doesn't work that well for me to go read about a relationship and relationship tools in a book and then just go practice that with my partner. I actually need to share about it in a circle, share about something that's happening in my life, and then have other people ask me like, well, yeah, how does that relate to this tool from this framework? And so we're bringing the frameworks, we're bringing the tools, and we're also bringing the counsel, which really helps people learn.
Yeah, for me, I'm a visual learner. So we're in Vancouver, BC right now, and there's a place here called Science World that was built in Expo 86. And I always say that I'm a Science World kid. I was there in diapers with a little toucan, but I'm a Science World kid because I like to walk around, touch, interact, see things visually. It helps me understand more about how this mechanism works or how this thing operates. So something about being in groups, in a group dynamic, yes, there's visual aids and different models that are presented so you can wrap your head around certain concepts, but also this ability to kind of interact with other people and ask questions on the fly and better understand, what do you mean by that? I don't get it. And it's very different from reading a book or taking a digital course online. And being in the moment, be able to feel into something or be processed or coached live, in front of the group. And there's a lot of positive things that come from that in terms of even being a witness to another person's process. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited about the programs that we're running this fall and the new cohorts that are going to be launched for the Conscious Relationship Council. And today, I'm looking forward to talking more about some of the IMAGO relationship theory and practical tools that couples can use to make a difference in their relationships, how to work through conflict, how to use conflict actually as a growth opportunity to deepen your relationship, and other insights that might come from this.
Mm-hmm. I think a good place to start would be talking about masculine leadership and what that looks like. There are times where the masculine representative in a relationship needs to lead, and there are times where the feminine representative needs to lead. And what does masculine leadership actually look like? And we were talking about John Wineland earlier. John came on my show recently, and at a base level, the masculine is structure. It's form for the formless, right? It's the form part of that polarity. That deeply resonates with me. My partner is very formless and flowy and intuitive, and things are always changing. I am much more consistent and sort of structural in how my mind works, in how my day operates. There's so many structures to me, and I can lead from that place in this relationship. I can be structure in our relationship that she can lean into. And she likes that. She's given me that feedback. She wants that. And so in the context of men working on relationship, men need to know that, like, if you are a masculine representative in relationship, you're responsible for providing a structure for your partner. And that doesn't mean like the rules of the house. That means creating a space where your partner feels safe and comfortable being her or his full self with you. All the emotions, all the wildness, all the change. And for you to be able to sort of hold that. And when I think about myself in my 20s in relationship, I could not hold anything. I could not deal with the volatility and the change, the constant change of the feminine. I was attracted to it, but I also felt like I didn't know how to handle it. And there was this, like, I was trapped in a way, like, geez, I want to be close to this, but I don't know how to deal with this. It's too much for me. And so for me as a man, figuring out how to be in relationship has been figuring out how to hold that space, hold a structure so that I can handle the feminine and I can hold the feminine and be there when the fire is hot.
As you're describing that whole experience, I'm thinking about a couple things. One is we learn and are socialized to some degree about this capacity to hold space for another, or the chaos of the feminine, or that flowing energy that you're describing. And there's something about awareness there, and consciousness, and being still and present in the moment that adds to this sense of like holding space. But there's also something else happening there when our partner does bring a lot of energy or a lot of emotion or a lot of chaos. There's actually other mechanisms there, like triggers, for example, that if your partner brings a lot of energy to you, that it might mirror or resemble intensity that you experienced in childhood when your mother or your father showed up that way. And so even though your partner might be well-intentioned or they're really wanting to speak about something, there's a familiar energy signature that can send you back into unconscious responses or behaviors, which are essentially the things you needed to do as a child to survive the family system, to get your needs met, to protect yourself, to minimize pain in some way. Yep. And that response, that unconscious response, often hits your partner in a certain way, and generally has some historical context from them. That energy signature is going to be, resembling something, is going to bring something up. Yeah. And this is why relationships are so hard, is because you have two people with their unconscious stuff, their projections about one another, their wounds and hurts from the past, and their deep fears about what can potentially happen in relationship and what being in attachment is all about. It's one of the things we talk about in the training is attachment theory, and the way that we all have these glasses on, metaphorical glasses we don't know that we're wearing. We're looking through this lens of information that's stored in our implicit memory as children, and it really informs what attachment's all about, right? Whether we need to be rigid or inflexible in order to stay in relationship, whether we need to abandon ourselves and become needless, whether relationships are a safe, enjoyable, pleasurable place, or whether they're really scary, threatening, and confusing. And this sets people up for, a lot of hurt, a lot more confusion, and ultimately not being able to break through certain patterns in their relationship because they remain stuck in this, what is kind of like a cloud of energy. There's often not a lot of clarity when you're in a place like that. Mm-hmm.
The beauty of sitting and talking about this stuff is it normalizes it a little bit. I think that's one of the most amazing benefits of sitting in circle and just talking about things, right? Is realizing like, oh, I'm not alone in this. Like, what a paradox to want to be in relationship and then to have an unconscious thought that intimacy and being in a relationship is an unsafe thing and that you need to avoid and pull away from your partner. Right? You get into the honeymoon phase and you want to be close to them. And when that sort of fades, fades, when that fades, you want to pull away. It's when they start to get close, you want to pull away, right? And so learning that like lots of other people deal with that, like half the population is playing that game, and the other half of the population is playing the like I can never be close enough game. It's great. It's amazing, just knowing that you're not crazy. Like I've been in, arguments with a partner and been in this dynamic that you're talking about where you're sort of smashing into each other's patterns and thought like, wow, I'm so broken. And I know my partner's feeling that too. Like, wow, we're just really fucked up.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the first challenges that couples experience is they have shame. They experience shame about the challenges that they have in their relationship. They feel badly that they struggle at all. They hate the fact that they experience these reoccurring conversations, these reoccurring fights, these patterns in the relationship they can't seem to break through or get past or resolve. And man, that makes a lot of sense that people feel that way because, you might even go do couples therapy or read a book together or, whatever it is. It's very difficult sometimes to break through these issues. And part of that is because of what you're saying, actually, paradox, is that there's a ton of paradox that exists in relationship. For example, the anxious person that is magnetically attracted to the avoidant, the person that comes out of childhood wanting more freedom in life, pairs up with the person who wants more stability and commitment.
Yeah.
Even some of the deeper philosophical understandings from IMAGO relationship theory, which is pioneered by Harville Hendricks and Helen Hunt in the famous book, Getting the Love You Want. One of the core things there is that conflict is a growth opportunity. And sometimes the thing that your partner needs the most is the hardest thing for you to give them. And, when you go deeper and deeper into this philosophy of conscious relationship, you just find more and more and more paradoxes. And I don't know if that's a setup, to drive us all crazy, but I know for sure that there's certainly a ton of insight and growth opportunities available. And there's a number of setups that people get into which create these challenges, create suffering, create a lot of pain, and have people feeling like we're incompatible. We're not meant to be together. What's the phrase that's used off a celebrity breakup? Irreconcilable differences, right? It's sort of like a PR statement about why it doesn't work.
Or I can't do relationships, right? Like, you can spend a decade recycling partners, getting new ones. Like, oh, this one doesn't work, get a new one. Oh, this one doesn't work, get a new one. And I was talking to a guy this weekend, and it was really clear to me that he was tired of his own bullshit in relationships. He was tired of his own patterns. Eventually, it gets old. And inevitably, that's what I find, is that guys show up at my door on my Zoom screen in between age 30 and 50, and they're saying, dude, in a way, like, I just can't stand myself anymore. Like, I can't keep doing things the same way because it's clear to me now that it's not her, it's me.
Yeah. So there's something really important there about patterns and noticing those in your relationships. So you might notice patterns between the partners that you've been with. You might notice patterns within your relationship of 2 or 5 or 20 or 30 years, reoccurring frustrations, reoccurring conflicts. And if those things are happening, for example, if you have a reoccurring frustration, reoccurring conflict come up more than 3 times, that's generally 100% about childhood. And what a lot of people don't get is that there's a growth opportunity associated with that. There's a healing experience that might be part of that. There are lost, frozen, disconnected, disowned parts of ourselves that are actually wanting to be reclaimed. So this second stage of relationship, called the power struggle, is actually a push towards wholeness and aliveness. So it's worth probably just stating for those that aren't aware, classically it's understood in conscious relationship, and there's different thoughts on this, that there's 4 stages. The first being the honeymoon, which we're all familiar with. You're in love, you're high on your neurochemical supply, you see the similarities, you want to be together all the time. This is this wonderful chemistry. Yep. And we know all the pop songs, the movies, the books, literature, a lot of things in culture are all about this phase. Mm-hmm. Or more dramatic phases like the second one, power struggle.
Yeah, that's where the spicy stuff is.
Yeah, and we start to get into noticing our partner's differences, our brain coding that difference as danger, as a threat. Maybe we've got to get out of here.
Mm-hmm. Problematic at the very least. Like, I don't like how this, maybe you've moved in together or something, I don't like how this person's stuff is all over my apartment, or how they load the dishwasher, or how they leave their dishes in the sink, or, some of the ways they talk. Maybe there's some arrogance there. Maybe there's some reclusiveness. Oh, you're not social enough. Like we start to sort of nitpick each other and find issue.
Yeah. And you know, for different people, there's different responses to that, different ways of coping. Some people might feel like I just got to get out of here and, you know, move on.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, this person isn't what I thought they were.
Yes.
When I was blinded.
Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of people end up in the coping phase, which can also, and it has been described as like a dead zone. And I'll be interested to hear, you know, what your thoughts on this are. But for me, you know, the way I see coping can be really, really kind of toned down and calm, like just kind of a subtle good morning kind of cold energy. Mm-hmm. It doesn't need to be highly volatile or destructive, but the way that some people cope in their relationship is to cheat and have affairs because they're feeling a lack of connection or a lack of physical intimacy, or some of the issues of the power struggle have gotten in the way of their connection with their partner, so they go elsewhere. Now, in extreme cases, some people actually abuse or beat their partner, or yell at them, or raise their voice, or smash dishes against the wall in order to cope with the challenges of relationship. Now, obviously that's a lot uglier and more of a toxic situation, but it's just true that this dead zone, this coping place, is full of all kinds of different ways of coping, including alcohol and other drugs.
Yeah, the power struggle phase is very spicy. It's all, you know, it's like, I've got the power, now you've got the power, right? We're fighting over little things and big things at the same time. And there's energy there. One of the things that defines that power struggle phase is that there's still lots of energy in the relationship. Maybe you're still having lots of sex, right? Because you may be fighting a lot, but there's still lots of attraction, lots of energy, lots of passion there. The passion is just sort of directed in different directions at times. In the dead zone, you've both kind of given up on trying to win the fight, trying to convince the other of your way of seeing things, trying to make the other person into the person that you wanted them to be in the beginning, trying to save them. People enter into a relationship trying to save the other person or trying to make them into something. You've kind of given that up. But usually people are in the dead zone because they're too scared to end the relationship. Because by that point, you're kind of just roommates. If you're living together, there's not any passion left. You're not having any sex. And I think most people listening to this have probably already been to the dead zone in at least one relationship. A lot of times you don't even know when you're in it because it's kind of like you're a frog in water, right? But when you get out of the relationship, you're like, wow, I didn't have sex for a year. But I was too afraid to get out of that relationship because I didn't want to be alone. But thank God I did that, right? It's like once you get over the grief of having to make a major life change, you're like, wow, I was dead inside and I'm starting to feel alive again. Maybe you have your first kiss again, or you go to ecstatic dance and you really lose yourself and you're like, oh my God, I feel alive again, right? So that's the dead zone. Is there anything past the dead zone, Nick?
Well, there is, and that's really what the Conscious Relationship Council is all about, is about moving into the fourth stage, adult love, conscious relationship. And, you know, as we spoke about earlier, that's not all rainbows and butterflies. Moving into conscious relationship really takes a lot of work, and it takes consistent practice to maintain a place where you've restored the safety, the play, the connection, the aliveness in the relationship, bring back some of the passion and creativity and self-expression. It takes work to do that. And the process is worth it's worth it in my mind to pursue this. That's just something that I personally value. I value truth. I value wisdom. And I've noticed that the pursuit of that has made a big difference in my life, but also in my relationships. Now, before kind of going any further there after this fourth stage, it's worth just noting, because this is why we went here in the first place, is you talked about one of your clients, someone that you've worked with, a man that was sharing about, or just all the men that come to work with you and say, I am sick and tired of this pattern. I want to change this. What that hit on for me is that people often do go through honeymoon, power struggle, maybe they go into coping, and then they make a choice. And what the choice that most people make is to exit the relationship and go looking for a new honeymoon, to go find someone who can love them the way that they really want to be loved, who's not going to upset them or aggravate them or trigger them in any way, and just find a relationship paradise.
Yeah, and it feels better to be in a honeymoon phase for the rest of your life with 100 people than it does to be in the dead zone with one person.
Yeah, it's a rough place to be. And what many people experience is they get back into a power struggle. They come up against some of the same patterns. They say, why is this happening to me? Why do I always end up with the same kind of person? Why, and the answer to that in terms of IMAGO theory is actually that there's an unconscious motivation for you to be in relationship. And that is to finalize and complete unfinished business from your childhood.
Yeah.
That's not something we talk about. That's not something that we say we're going to do. That's not generally a conscious intention when we see someone and we think that they're attractive. We're looking at the way they carry themselves, the way they speak, the way they dress. We're looking at a number of factors that might contribute to our standards of beauty. We might evaluate their personality and lifestyle for alignment. Does it fit our relationship vision?
Yeah, you have no idea that this is going on in your mind.
No.
You have no idea that you're in relationship unconsciously to deal with your stuff from childhood.
And it's that insight and that awareness that starts to create a bridge into conscious relationship, into this fourth stage of adult love. Mm-hmm. Now, the good news is if you want to take this on and you want to be one of the men that puts their hand up and wants to take the lead, wants to be responsible for growth in relationship, and you want to join us in one of our trainings, you are going to get a lot from that. And you are also going to, in your relationships, even when you move past a power struggle and you start working on these things and having tools, resources, et cetera, to really sustain your the vitality, health of your relationship, you're going to come up against a new power struggle because there's levels, there's new challenges, there's more growth. And that's why we have a joke in the IMAGO community anyway, which is AFGO, another fucking growth opportunity, because it's just another one and another one. And here we go again.
Another one.
Yeah,
it never ends. It never ends. But the healing journey, the portal into this is knowing and learning what your personal issues are. What's your personal relationship struggle, and how does it tie back to your childhood? So if you're listening to this or watching this, and I ask you the question, what is the pattern that you run in relationships, and how does that relate to your childhood? If you can't answer that, that's where you need to go. You need to launch an inquiry with a safe person or a safe group of people and find out, really sort of boil down and talk out, hash out, what are the patterns you're running in your relationships and how do they relate to your childhood? And then go to your childhood and work on that stuff in the present day to sort of unravel and untie some of this stuff that was stuck that wants to be resolved. And you can do that with a safe person and a safe group of people. And you also, at some level, are going to do that with your partner, because your partner is going to be the person to trigger you every time. Your romantic partner is going to be the person to trigger you every time. And that's your biggest opportunity, is when you're triggered in the moment, to soften or open and go somewhere new. Then that pattern, that coping strategy that you learned so long ago, right? So we look at the coping and we look for, what's under the coping? What wound is under there? And how far back does that go? Where's that connected? And knowing that is like such a huge piece, right? Like just the awareness of like, oh, this is what I'm doing. Like that'll make you extra tired of your own bullshit. Because watching yourself do that over and over is torturous. So the excavation process and just discovering, what patterns you're running is really half the battle.
Well, one of the tools that we give the Men in the Conscious Relationship Council is a guide to difficult feelings, a clear step-by-step method that can help them process their triggers, their big feelings, energy in the body, and to create more insight about what's the historical context, where does this come from, what's the story that I'm making up about myself or the other person or my partner or the people involved, or the story I'm making up about the world, and where does that originate from? Do you see this story from your past? What does this remind you of from childhood? I mean, these are just the first few steps. But the point is a practical resource like that, something that anyone can print out to keep in their wallet, their purse, the bedside table, the glove box of their car, to be able to instantaneously just take 5 minutes. You can even go to the bathroom privately, pull it up on your phone, and process what's coming up for you. That is a really, really powerful tool. And one of the last questions is, what do you need right now?
Yeah.
After kind of working through this is, okay, what's the new choice that you could make? And one of my friends, the way that she talks about this is like, look, this is the practical aspect of healing. Healing is not necessarily a medicine ceremony or the wave of a shaman's rattle or going to the $40,000 spiritual retreat in Costa Rica, but actually practically making choices on a daily basis, making choices in your relationship about what is good for you versus what is familiar. So if, for example, your tendency is to hide or deny that you have stress, or hide or deny that you're feeling anxiety in your relationship, what might be good for you is to talk about that in a grounded, structured way.
Yeah, right. What a concept. That's a very simple thing. And it's true for me. I'm like more avoidant in a relationship. And so I lean out. I don't speak about what's going on. I avoid, and I just never talk about it. And so the mere act of saying to my partner, like, hey, honey, like, I'm actually feeling something. It's been bothering me. Can we talk about it? And then having her, when she's ready, sitting down and saying, hey, this is what's been coming up for me. I've been building some resentment around this. You said this to me earlier. It made me feel this way. It reminds me of blankety blank. And, here's actually what I needed in that moment. And here's the soft spot that it's touching on. That's, first of all, really hard. And second of all, pretty simple. You just have to do it, and you just have to know that that's like it actually is that simple.
Yeah. Yeah, there's one other, side to that. If that example didn't resonate with people, is that if you fight and argue when you feel stress, when you feel anxiety in your relationship, that's a different kind of expression. And in IMAGO terms, we say minimizer, maximizer. The maximizer being the person who wants to talk about things right away, wants to resolve issues, has a tendency to take the offense on certain subject matter, has a tendency to expand the energy of the conflict, or draw attention towards themselves, draw attention towards the issue. And I resonate with you. I'm more of a minimizer classically, so I might hide or deny that I'm stressed out or that I'm feeling anxiety about something and avoid talking about it. And that could be, isolation, detachment, avoidance, becoming rigid, becoming a perfectionist or competitive in certain ways. And everyone has certain kinds of adaptations like this that form their characterological structure. It's kind of just becomes who you are. But some of the automatic, unconscious ways that we aren't necessarily effective for us. So there's really, really a ton of powerful insights here. And one of the reasons that I've dedicated my life to teaching about this and working with people one-on-one and working with couples. And the conscious relationship arena is full of all kinds of different ideas and methods and approaches. But the one thing that's just true, for all of the wisdom traditions and teachings on this is that when you step into that arena of a relationship and you say you want romance in your life, you say that you want a partner, that you want to have a travel buddy, you want to have great sex, or you want to get married, you want to have kids, whatever the vision is, as soon as you step into that arena, it's not all love and poetry and cuddles. When you step into that arena, there's also shadows and wounds and things from the past that you don't necessarily want to revisit.
Traumas, right? This is a
Yeah.
common word these days. A lot of people have trauma.
Yeah. And
It's going to
so
come up.
I think for me personally, and other people might relate to this, is still have, and I'm working on this, an idealized idea about what relationships ought to be, and that they should be perfect, or let's reduce the level of suffering, let's transcend that. We don't need to suffer in any way, and let's not fight, let's work through things cordially. But the truth is that there's grief and sadness and hurt and upset that's connected with being attached to another person, because there are going to be misunderstandings. There's going to be mistakes. Someone's going to forget. They're not going to remember to do something. They're going to overcommit. They might set expectations to a high degree and not follow through. And these are not great long-term patterns. We can correct these things, create behavior change, and show up in ways that are, aligned for the agreements in the relationship. My point is when any of us step into this zone of romance, this arena of relationship, we are inevitably going to encounter some of the issues that we're talking about, and we're going to need support. We're going to need resources and tools. We're going to need someone to help guide us out, because if we're in the back of that dark cave, we need someone to come along with a torch,
Yeah, dark cave. Like, it will become your nightmare. Your relationship, a deep relationship, at some point will actually become your worst nightmare, right? Like, Harville and Helen Hendricks said this. And like, on face value, it's like, wait a minute. Like, really? But yes. Like, my partner has an abandonment wound. She's written about it a lot. She's talked about it a lot. And so her worst fear is that I'm going to abandon her. And I have not physically abandoned her. But there have been many times where I have abandoned her energetically, emotionally. I have not shown up for her in a way that she felt seen and heard. She was asking for one thing and I gave her another, and just out of my own ignorance. We talked recently on an episode that we recorded where I bought her a gift for Christmas, which was the exact thing she didn't want. Right? Like, that's abandonment as well, in a sense. Like, you're in relationship with me, but what you want doesn't matter. I'm actually going to give you the thing you don't want. Like, that's a type of abandonment. And so for her in those moments, our relationship becomes her worst nightmare. Because here I am, I'm in front of her, but I'm abandoning her.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. When I hear you saying that, I'm thinking about the stories that we go into about these experiences with our partners and in our relationships. And for me, one of the mistakes that I've made in the past is taking things personally and going into some kind of reactivity. Now, that reactivity might be going into a turtle shell, shrinking, constricting my energy. It could be expanding, getting loud. And that pattern has created a lot of issues, because one of the two things that really you just need to focus on in a relationship is avoiding getting reactive and not taking things personally. But it's so hard to do when whatever is happening in our relationship, the way our partner shows up, the way they behave, the way they say something, interfaces and plugs in like Lego to one of our wounds and hurts and things from the past. It's so hard to not make that mean something about me.
It's usually our biggest trigger. Yeah. And so, like, going back to the piece I was just sharing around, I show up ignorantly sometimes in relationship. I'm an ignorant dude, and I don't do things intentionally to hurt my partner. But I'm ignorant. She feels a feeling, and then she brings that feeling to me. Like, hey, I'm feeling this. I'm upset about this. I'm feeling abandoned or unseen, or I'm mad at you, and that triggers my issue with criticism from the feminine, particularly because when I was a kid, I was often controlled and what felt like criticized by the women in my life. The women were the primary caretakers in my life, and I over-identified with feedback from women. And so in my 20s, when any romantic partner brought me any feedback, I would shut them out. I would freeze them out. Get out of here. Like, I don't want to be in a relationship with you anymore. And so you can see how there's a perfect setup in my own relationship where when I'm ignorant, I do something that hurts my partner, it triggers her deepest wound, and then she brings that to me. My tendency is to actually want to push her away further. And so her worst nightmare gets even worse. And in all of that, it's also my nightmare. And so going back to what you were just saying, I need to learn to suspend my reactivity with her and give a little space for myself and for her to really see what's going on, see the pattern that's playing out, and do what John Wineland says, which is hold the pose, right? You imagine like holding a hard yoga pose, and it's like really difficult, and you want to let go, but like you need to hold on and don't snap out of it. Just stay there, stay in your meditation, hold the pose for long enough for like the real clicks to happen and for you to really release what you need to release. And we need to learn to hold the pose in relationship.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And alongside that is also this agreement that couples can create about taking a break. So one of the tools that I teach is the IMAGO dialogue, which is this structure that's all about equality and gives people a format to resolve their issues, have conversations, express themselves in certain ways, and to uncover insights about what might be going on in their relationship. When I give people that tool, one of the challenges they come up against is like, okay, well, I want to talk about this right now, but my partner's not available. They're working, or they don't feel like it, or this kind of thing. And not every moment is a great moment to hold the pose. Mm-hmm. Not every moment is a great moment to have a difficult conversation. And there's something there about consent and boundaries that's like, okay, I want to talk. Are you available now? No. Okay, I'm going to hold that pose. I'm going to hold space for that no, that you're not available. Okay, and let's create an agreement that, we're going to talk within 24 to 48 hours. I'm bringing this up because this is something that me and my partner are practicing, which is all about taking this break. And one of the mistakes that we've made in this process is taking a break, saying, hey, let's put a pause in this right now because it feels like it's kind of getting intense. Let's take a break and let's come back to this conversation. The mistake that we made is not saying when, right? So if we say take a break, we're going to come back in 30 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour, and then to do that and follow through. Because actions matching words and integrity is a big part of creating safety in relationship. It's one of the 5 pillars. So I know I'm saying a lot there, but there's this really beautiful thing you're describing about holding the pose, which could be holding the pose of their partner being unavailable, holding the pose of, okay, they're upset, they're hurt, let me just stay with this, let me be present to this, let me turn off the TV channel of my life, let me put my reality aside for a moment and my stories and just be attuned and listening, with the other person, which I want to emphasize in terms of creating secure attachment with your partner. One of the things that makes the biggest difference is that your partner feels gotten. So the sense that, oh, you get me. And the sense that I've got you, I get it, I've got it, which is not about agreeing. It's not about submitting and surrendering and bowing down to your partner's worldview, but it's about creating understanding. And okay, I've got where you're at. And so for couples working on this, people that really want to develop more secure attachment, this is one of the basic things that they can do to practice in their conversations.
Getting curious about each other, right? And to get curious about your partner in a moment where you've got a lot going on. It's almost the furthest thing from your mind.
Yes. Which is why, again, the thing your partner might need the most in that moment is the hardest thing for you to give them. This paradox kind of exists in almost all conflicts in relationship. At some level, there's a paradox going on.
So I think it's probably worth talking about boundaries because I think there's a lot of, I know a lot of men, and I have been one of these men, who says yes when he actually needs to say no, right? I've had a lot of conversations with my partners where they're bringing a frustration or we're processing something, and I actually don't feel like I gave my full consent. I don't fully want to be there. I didn't fully choose it. I kind of said yes when I wanted to say no. And it's on a huge pile of other times where I said yes, where I meant no. And so then I show up in a way where I'm kind of resentful, I'm kind of half there, and I'm not fully committed to the conversation. And I think a lot of people will be able to resonate with that. It's one of the hallmarks of a nice guy. Nice guys basically are so used to doing this that they lose their connection to what they truly want, right? They're so used to sort of giving it away, like, oh, I'm doing it for the other people, I'm doing it for them, I'm doing it for her, I'm doing it for him, that you don't even really know what you want anymore, or you're operating under a belief that there isn't really space for what you want, which ends up making you resentful and pissed off at the world. And it shrinks you in a way. It's like you're taking a chip off of yourself every day that you live like that. And so you live that way long enough, you end up in a very disempowered place in relationship, and you can't really show up as your best self, right? So let's take a minute to talk about boundaries and talk about the different kinds of boundaries and how we can learn to be in the middle.
Well, my current thinking on boundaries is that there's a bit of a spectrum there, from porous. You can think of porous like sort of a Swiss cheese boundary, or you tell a person not to enter your house, but you leave the door open.
Yeah.
Healthy boundary, and rigid, which can be really intense, can be coming from a place of more controlling, inflexibility, stubbornness. Can be all kinds of different ways that our boundaries are informed. But hopefully that paints a little bit of a picture of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Loose and really strong.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. Yeah, with no kind of flexibility. And some boundaries need to be that way. But I think when people hear this concept or this word, they also think that a boundary is something between me and you. That if I set a boundary with you, it means that I want you further away from me, or I don't want to interact with you, or I never want to see you again. Mm-hmm. But actually, boundaries are important for the health of all relationships, and they're important in the relationships with the people you care about the most. So for you and me, we have boundaries in our relationships, which could be respecting each other's time, could be we start meetings when we say we're going to start them, we end them when we're going to start them. I mean, these are just examples. Mm-hmm. And what that's about is not a boundary, not trying to keep you further from me, but it's actually about bringing us closer together. Mm-hmm. That you understand how I want to be related to, and I understand how you want to be related to, and somewhere in that we meet in the middle, come to an agreement about it. Now, not all relationships obviously are that easy or simple, and some are more complicated, especially when you need to set boundaries with a parent or a partner, or someone you're co-parenting with, like an ex, for example, mm-hmm. and things can get a lot more complicated.
But yeah, there's an acknowledgement there that in any healthy relationship, there's an acknowledgement of one another's boundaries. I like that. We've got mental boundaries. We've got, how much space I can take up in your mind, on your phone, in your text. It's not appropriate for me to just text you constantly, right? Like, no, that's too much. I'm giving you too much of my mind, because your mind is very connected to your phone. Or for me to take up all the space in a conversation, right? Not spend any time listening. Mental, emotional boundaries, right? What we're willing to share with one another or not, what we're willing to hold space for or not. Physical boundaries, obviously, right? So there's lots of different kinds of boundaries, and maybe we can address how men need to deal with their own lack of boundaries, their own sort of porous boundaries first, and then we can talk about how to deal with rigid boundaries. So guys who, they're saying yes when they mean no, they're not really even connected to what they want, and they're not well versed in speaking about them, sharing them with other people, enforcing those boundaries. Where do you start?
One of the aspects of masculine embodiment, masculine polarity, is consciousness. emptiness, stillness. So, for example, at the beginning of your podcast, there's the throat singing. If you imagine this just like cosmic, infinite universe, at some level, that's the masculine. Or this big granite wall, you're talking about structure, immovable, the part of you that's never changed. And what that might look like is slowing things down and to be more in the present moment, in the here and now. And from that place, you've just got more awareness, and you've got this almost this moment of emergence. It's like expanding the second, expanding the moment just a little bit to respond in a different way or make a new kind of choice. And what I really mean here is authenticity, truthfulness. So if you ask me if now is a good time to talk, and it's not, and I'm not available, but I say yes, I'm not being truthful. And part of that is because I'm not aware of what's going on in me. I'm not attuned to myself, which could be about anxious attachment, this overemphasis on others, and a lack of attunement to self. It could be a lot of things going on. But the first point is really about, okay, truthfulness is one of the pillars of safety in a relationship. So it's really important that I'm truthful about that. My partner can handle my truth in just a respectful, clear, grounded way. And that we can work that out together. We can hang in there long enough with each other to kind of get what we both mean and kind of what we need and make an agreement about that. So, that boundary thing, the way that I think about it is so much in the requests for attention, the requests for energy, the request to talk about things. And one of the first places that people can start is, especially for men, is to develop their conscious awareness, to develop that sense of presence, and to be more attuned with what's happening within them and communicate clearly and transparently about that without fear of the relationship falling apart, without fear of loss of approval, loss of love, some of the core things that are really underneath the reasons that we become nice guys or the reasons that we become people pleasers.
For me, one of the telltale signs that a boundary needs to be set or has been crossed is that I'm feeling agitated in some way. I'm feeling angry, resentful, uncomfortable in the relationship. I want to avoid the person. I want to avoid a conversation. There's a feeling going on. So what you're saying is exactly right. Like, I need to be sensitive enough to feel that something's up. And then I need to look at, okay, well, what is that? Like, what am I feeling? Who's it about? And what is it about? Is it that, this person is there? There's a mental boundary that's being crossed here, or there was a physical boundary that was crossed, and it's sort of, I didn't speak to it in the moment, and so it's coming up for me over and over, and I need to address it with that person. But just, that line of inquiry, like, what is the boundary here that needs to occur? And then figuring out how to have that conversation with the person to resolve the feeling so that I can feel like I'm at peace again. Like when things are going well between you and I'm not feeling those things because there's no boundary issues. So the feelings are this telltale sign, this trigger that something's up. And sometimes it's a really simple thing between two people, and other times it's like a really complicated thing in a complex relationship. But the concept still works.
One of the modules in the Conscious Relationship Council that we focus on is all about boundaries. And in that module, we get the men to explore what sort of relationships in their life are triggering anger, anxiety, frustration, resentment. Who can they be themselves around? Who are they blaming their problems on? And some of the answers to these questions are undoubtedly themselves, but there's also other people that are part of their life that make them feel anxious, that they resent, that they're pissed off at. So we identify those people. And the reason we ask those questions, and we're looking specifically at these frustrating or difficult parts of one's experience, is those are the lights on the dashboard of the car saying, hey, there's a boundary issue here.
Yeah,
you need
flashing.
to look at this. And when men dig into that, they discover really where the line in the sand needs to be, which is, okay, so what's going on here? Who is the person? What's the boundary being violated? What are the needs that I have? What is it that I want from this relationship? And to discover where that is. When you go to a theme park, they have a boundary. And that boundary often is you need to be this tall to ride. Mm-hmm. And that sets a really clear line and a standard. Now, wouldn't it be nice if all of us had a really clearly defined standard and prerequisite, for what we're willing to put up with or tolerate in relationship, and that we just trusted that boundary and stood firm on it instead of abandoning it or maybe saying it's not that important, making excuses, or tolerating repeated boundary errors or violations from our partner. And just to clear up what an error violation is, like a boundary error is when someone's crossing a boundary, but they don't know that they're doing it. Mm-hmm. So they're calling you at 4 a.m. for support constantly because they're feeling anxious in their dating experience, but you haven't set a boundary with them to say, hey, I'm not available this time to talk with you. It's the middle of the night. Mm-hmm. And that example might seem ridiculous, but this is challenges that people deal with. A boundary violation is when someone repeatedly is crossing the line, crossing the boundary with you, and they know you've had a conversation with them. And there's different ways that you might deal with that. And we talk about that in the council, about strategies that you might use to have difficult conversations, to set boundaries, even scripts to work through this stuff with partners or other people in your life. Yeah. I know you really want the men to feel empowered with things they can take away, such that maybe we become irrelevant in some way, that they've got the tools, they've got the things they can take action on and apply the insights effectively.
One of the most valuable pieces of having a men's circle while guys are doing it with us is having a group of people ask you, what do you want? What do you really want? That other person isn't here. That relationship that you're talking about, that person isn't here. What do you truly want? In that silent space where you're deeply listening to what you want, and the consciousness of the other men can bring up your truth. And then from that place, this is a 2-step process. The second step is, what are you going to do about it? And that's a big one, I think. I think a lot of guys have insights into their relationship. They see patterns running and they want to change them. They want to stop and do something different. They don't know what to do. And even if they do, having the accountability to do something different is a rare thing. Having a group of guys who aren't just going to shoot the shit with you and talk about cars and politics and whatever's happening in the outside world, guys who are actually going to go like, oh, okay, what's a problem in your life that isn't, you know what you need to do, are you going to go do that sometime soon? Like holding a guy accountable to take action. That's what a men's group is for. So I love that we're taking these relationship tools and we're putting them in a men's group context. You and I have been running men's groups for 6-7 years now, and we've seen the value in it. I want to start a men's group for addiction work as well, just an addiction support circle, because coaching guys one-on-one is great, but in some ways I believe that a group is more powerful than working with people one-on-one. There's an egregor energy that is like larger than the sum of its parts that occurs in a group. And even though a guy might not get as much airtime, like when you're coaching a guy for 90 minutes, it's like just you and him for that 90 minutes. Guys learn so much from each other's process and seeing like, oh, this guy's going through the exact same thing that I'm going through, So I may be talking to that guy, but the other guy's going like, oh yeah, I'm totally in this guy's shoes. Like I'm learning right now. So there's this group learning, this group growth experience that occurs that's just magical.
Yeah, it's incredible. The men also get a lot more time with you and me in the room, learning, doing Q&A, getting the live coaching than they would, one-on-one. There's just so much value for the price in this council. And I love the work that you're doing with Evolving Man and how many people the podcast has reached. And I think you running a men's group focused maybe on addictions, as you're saying, would just be awesome, well received, and like so needed, because the coping stuff that we talked about is real, and we all have ways of coping with stress that can be, unhelpful, ineffective, self-sabotaging, and just totally destructive to our lives.
This shit is real, man. I feel like we just made an intro, but we're out of time. And I honestly could talk for 3 hours with you about this stuff. Like, I feel like we just scratched the surface here, but I think we gave people an idea of what we get up to in those circles. And I'm glad that we took the time to do this, man. So thank you for sitting down with me, and thanks for bringing your wisdom here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be here. For everyone that is still here listening to this and checking out the conversation, the Conscious Relationship Council is running September 14th and 15th of the start dates. We have one on Pacific Standard Time and one on GMT for Europe. And those groups are going to meet every week for 2 hours for 12 weeks. And Ben and myself are going to be taking everybody through our curriculum, which is a combination of live Q&A, live coaching, with presentation of certain concepts, theories, principles, and tools that make a big difference in people's lives. And on top of that, we give focus assignments, accountability. You get access to the Evolving Man app, so you can do Q&A after sessions. You get after-hour support, and we share all the files and resources there as well with additional links. So I just want to mention that. Obviously, you can visit evolvingman.com to sign up, get more info, get more details.
Yeah.
And hope to see
some of you guys there.
Some of you guys there,
I'm really excited to do guys in Europe.
Yeah.
Like, I'm really excited to launch that time zone, because we've had lots of guys in Europe reaching out saying like, hey, like this time doesn't work for me. So I'm stoked to do that. I'm stoked to do it again with you. And yeah, folks, evolvingman.com. It's there. And we're going to take in 26 guys in each cohort. So looking forward to it. And until next time, Nick.
You got it. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks.